All right. Oh. Welcome. I see someone has entered the webinar. Thank you for coming today. We're going to wait till a couple minutes after 5 to begin the program. And we've got 4 very wonderful poets who are going to be reading today. They come from all over the country, so I'm very excited to welcome them here to this program. Did any of you get to the Cape?
No.
No, Cheryl, do you ever
Not
get?
in a while, but I'm really looking forward to it.
Oh, I hope you'll come. I hope you come. We have a wonderful new exhibition on the history and culture of the Wampanoag.
Oh, I'd love to see it.
Mm-hmm.
I
That's it.
definitely would too. And so the next time I come to the Cape, I will come visit the museum. And and under normal times, my husband and I visit the Cape fairly regularly because his sister and niece live there.
Oh, really? Where are they?
In Wellfleet.
Oh, that's where I live.
Wellfleet.
Okay, cool.
We usually
Nice.
go out to Mashpee, but this year, of course, we didn't go, nor did we go last year. But we've gone out there in regular times, on irregular years for many years for the powwow.
Yes.
Nice. I know they didn't do a powwow last fall. I think that they are hoping to have the powwow this September.
Ben, where are you? Where are you coming from?
I'm in Norfolk, Virginia. There's like a big Navy base, Virginia Beach, but I'm actually zooming in from Miami. I just flew in not 2 hours ago. So
Oh, wow. Okay.
yeah, I'm in Miami now.
Okay.
Wow. So you must know Drew Lopenzina.
I do. I just spoke with Drew last night. I think he's the
Okay.
last email that I sent out before I left. Yeah.
And did he mention that he was my last speaker?
Oh, no, I had no idea. I'm going to have to look into that. Yeah.
Oh, is that taped? I'd love to see that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can see it from our website. He was terrific. Oh my goodness. He was really, really wonderful. He did a wonderful program for us just a week ago.
Oh, wow.
Fantastic.
Say hi to Drew next time you speak to him.
Yes, for me too.
Oh,
Yeah.
so he went to UMass Amherst. Do you know him from there? Ron?
No, he's a professor at Old Dominion University with me.
Right, I know, but he
He
attended
did his
UMass.
undergraduate work at UMass.
Oh,
Right.
okay.
I know him
And-
from his graduate school days at UNH. I did some readings out there for Siobhan Senier,
Oh, yeah.
and he was a student of hers. That's when I met him.
Very small world.
That's
Yeah.
so cool.
Telling
Yeah,
me, Ben, Saturnalia Press is published in Ardmore, PA.
Yeah.
Well, you keep going out and you come to my hometown of Berwyn. It's
That
right
sounds
outside-
perfect.
Yeah.
I'm from Mechanicsburg, PA, right outside Harrisburg, and my second book is with Saturnalia.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. It's a small world.
It is.
Yes.
certainly is. We're all connected. Absolutely. All right, it is 5 o'clock. I think we'll get started. Welcome everyone who is here to Voices of Indigenous Poets. We've got 4 terrific nationally known Indigenous poets who will be reading their work this afternoon. Before we begin, I would like to say the Highland House Museum stands on the traditional homelands of the Peomet tribe of the Wampanoag Nation, who've inhabited Cape Cod for more than 12,000 years and who knew this part of Truro as Tashmuit. The Truro Historical Society acknowledges the displacement, suffering, and forced assimilation of the Wampanoag and other Native people caused by European colonization. We honor the struggles of the Wampanoag, people of the First Light. We support their work of cultural recovery, and we ask museum visitors to reflect on our shared responsibility for social justice. Our first reader this afternoon is Lucille Langday. Lucille is of Wampanoag, British, and Swiss German descent. She is the author of 11 poetry collections, including Bird of San Pancho and other poems of place and Becoming an Ancestor. She has co-edited 2 anthologies, Fire and Rain, Echo Poetry of California, and Red Indian Road West, Native American Poetry from California. Lucille has published 2 children's books and a memoir entitled Married at 14, A True Story. Her many honors include the Blue Light Poetry Prize, 2 Penn Oakland Josephine Miles Literary Awards, the Joseph Henry Jackson Award, and 11 Pushcart Prize nominations. She is the founder and publisher of Scarlet Tanager Books and lives in Oakland, California. So I am so thrilled to have you here, Lucille. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much, Lauren. I'm very happy to be here. And I would like to start with a brief land acknowledgement for Oakland, California, which is where I'm reading from. Oakland, California is on land where the Chochenyo Ohlone people lived for more than 10,000 years before the arrival of Europeans. The Ohlone people still live in California today, and the Muwekma Ohlones are currently seeking federal recognition. I wish to thank the Ohlones for their long stewardship of this land and also acknowledge that since the US Congress never ratified any of the treaties with California tribes, the Ohlones never ceded any of their land to the US. So now I'm going to read from 2 of my poetry collections. I'm going to start out with 2 poems from my latest collection, Birds of San Pancho and Other Poems of Place. And the first poem I'll read is called At Lake Tahoe. Granite mountains, dense with white firs, lodgepole pines, and ponderosas, rise abruptly from the lake's blue bowl, so deep its waters could cover all of California and Nevada. The Washos, who lived here 10,000 summers, named it Lake in the Sky because it reflected clouds, sunset, and stars. They caught Lahontan trout in the lake, mountain whitefish in icy streams. On the other side of the continent, my Wampanoag ancestors were gathering cranberries, covering their summer homes with cattail mats, baking clams, drying corn, and fishing for salmon off Cape Cod. The Washos used only fallen trees for homes they would dismantle before leaving Lake in the Sky each winter. In fall, they gathered pinyon pine nuts to eat until spring. This was before white people came and cut down the pinyon pines to build their houses, dynamited the mountains in search of silver and gold, and claimed the fish. Now, a paddle boat with 3 decks takes tourists on cruises of Lake Tahoe. Yet in summer, Washos still do the pine nut dance, and Wampanoags do the grass dance to keep the world in balance and remind us that the earth is living. Every rock is sacred, and every tree and salmon has a soul. And now I'm going to read a poem that takes place on Cape Cod. This is called Shoe Story. My soul started flapping like a huge tongue on my left sneaker when I was 3,000 miles from home. It was raining on Cape Cod that summer day, and I brought no other shoes except sandals. I was afraid I might lose my soul or that it might trip me. The way it folded back as I walked was truly scary. So I bought new sneakers, pretty black and white ones with mesh tops and white soles to keep my feet dry in the rain. But rain leaked through the mesh and the fabric beneath it, saturating my socks and feet. The next day, I bought waterproof sneakers, green and brown ones, so now I have 4 new soles. This is the sole life I know, where you can throw out a worn out sole and get 2 or even 4 new ones. Then walk along the salt marsh as swans glide in pooling light, where pilgrims first met Wampanoags, who used cordgrass from the marsh for baskets, wore deerskin, moccasinash, and didn't need these newcomers to save their souls. And now I'm going to read a couple poems from one of my previous books, Becoming an Ancestor. And first, I'll tell you a little bit about my Wampanoag heritage. My mother's maternal grandfather was Wampanoag, but my mother's mother died when my mother was very small, and my mother was adopted by a non-native couple who brought her to California. And so she never met her Wampanoag relatives. And after she died, I decided I wanted to meet the Wampanoags. And so I called the Mashpee tribe and I said I wanted to come visit, which I did. And when I arrived, the first thing anyone said to me was, "Welcome home." So I wrote a poem called Welcome Home. Welcome home to Mashpee, where snapping turtles and painted turtles bask on logs in the marsh, amid water willows, ferns, and pickerel weed with purple flowers reaching up from the shallows. Welcome home to the place where your great-grandfather whispered to trout he caught at Santuit Pond, then sat in a circle and offered his pipe to earth, sky, and the 4 directions. Welcome home to the coast where your ancestors built Wetuash and gathered cranberries, to the woods where they hunted turkey, deer, and bear, and to the clearings clad in goldenrods and asters where they danced for 10,000 years. Welcome home. The elders have been waiting for you. Listen to their drums, the beat of your own heart. Take this wampum necklace made from the sacred shell of the quahog clam. When you wear it, walk through redroot and wild lupin. Hear the quickening rhythm of the field sparrow's song. And the next poem I'll read is called Instructions for a Wampanoag Clam Bake. Wade into Papanesset Bay to collect some rock people, old round stones smoothed by the tide. Remember Moshup, the giant who predicted the arrival of white men. When he said goodbye to the people of the first light, he turned into a whale. Find a place in forest shade, make a circle and dig a shallow round hole for the stones. Moshup's friend, the giant frog, came to the cliffs and wept. Changed into a rock, he still sits at Gayhead today and looks out to sea. Before finding dry wood for the fire, your gift from the forest, notice the shape of the hole and the stones. All life is a circle. When the tide is low, gather quahog and sickasog clams and plenty of rockweed, whose stipes are loaded with brine. Light a fire over the stones, and when the rock people start to glow, pile rockweed on them. This is their blanket. As salt water is released from the stipes and steam rises, add clams, lobsters, corn, more armfuls of rockweed. This is the Apanogue, seafood cooking. Now thank Katanet, who saw the frog's sorrow and turned him into a rock out of pity, and taught the people to use the earth, plants, animals, and water to care for themselves after Moshe left. The deer will always make you laugh. The mountain lion take your side. The star people shine on your path if you do it this way. And I'm going to read just one more poem. It's longer than the others. And it's called, and it's also from my book, Birds of San Pancho and Other Poems of Place. And it's called Names of the States. Alabama, for the Alabama tribe, forced from Alabama to Texas when white people claimed their land in 1805. Alaska, for the Aleut word Alyeska, meaning mainland, the place toward which the sea flows. Arizona, the word for small spring in the Oadum language of a Southwest desert people who couldn't vote until 1948. Arkansas, another name for the Quapaws, the downstream people, who were removed to Oklahoma from their ancestral lands. Connecticut, from the Algonquian word for Long River Place. Delaware, from Baron de la Warr, Virginia's first governor, whose name rechristened the local Lenni Lenape, the first tribe to sign a treaty with the US. Hawaii, for Hawaii Loa, discoverer of the islands in Polynesian myth. Idaho, maybe Shoshone for the sun comes down the mountain, or the Apache name for the Comanches who drove them from the southern plains. Illinois, a French transliteration of Illinois, the Ojibwe word for the Anoka, whose 13 tribes were reduced to 5 by European disease. Indiana, land of the Indians, the Delaware, Piankashaw, Kickapoo, Waya, Miami, Shawnee, and Potawatomi, who were mostly removed by 1846. Iowa, from the Dakota name for the Iowa tribe, meaning sleepy ones. Kansas, the Dakota word for the South Wind people, whose last fluent speaker of the Kansa language died in 1983. Kentucky, from the Iroquoian word for on the meadow. Massachusetts, people of the Great Hills, that is the Blue Hills south of Boston Harbor, who were decimated by smallpox in 1633. Michigan, from Michigamaa, great water in the language of the Ojibwe, who like so many others didn't understand the treaties ceding their land. Minnesota, from Minnesota, the name the Dakotas gave the Minnesota River, whose clear blue water reflected clouds. Mississippi, from Mississippi, Ojibwe, for the great river, along which more than 20 tribes lived and fished. Missouri, for the Missouri tribe that lived on the Missouri River, a Siouan people whose name means town of the big canoes. Nebraska, from Nebraska, the Omaha word for broad water, a description of the Platte River by which the tribe lived. New Mexico, named for the Mexicas, a Nahuatl-speaking people who ruled the Aztec Empire until the Spanish conquered them in 1519. North and South Dakota, named for a Sioux tribe whose men were sentenced in 1862 to the largest mass execution in US history, though Dakota means friend. Ohio, from Ohio, continuously giving river in the language of the Senecas, whose land was flooded in 1965 following construction of Kenzua Dam. Oklahoma, from Oklahoma, Choctaw for red people, a name proposed by the chief of the Choctaw Nation during treaty negotiations in 1866. Oregon, maybe from Warrigan, an Algonquian word for beautiful river, but so many native words and languages have been lost that it's hard to say. Tennessee, for the Cherokee town Tanasi, a village on the Little Tennessee River until the Cherokees were marched to Oklahoma along the Trail of Tears. Texas, meaning friends or allies in the language of the Caddos, who were removed to Oklahoma in 1859. Utah, from Utahai, an Apache word meaning people of the mountains. Wisconsin, from Mesconsing, the name for the Wisconsin River in the Miami language, river running through a red place. Wyoming, a contraction of Mechi-Weamiing, a Delaware word first used for a valley in Pennsylvania, meaning at the Big Plains. And yes, every part of this land is Indian country, from forest to desert, mountain to prairie, Manhattan to Yosemite, Tallahassee to Seattle, all the fields, rivers, hills, and canyons between the two shining seas. So thank you very much. Kuda Pudish.
Thank you. That was really quite powerful. Thank you, Lucy. Our next speaker is Ben Naka-Hasebe. Ben was born to two True Temper wheelbarrow factory workers and belongs to the Onondaga Nation of Indigenous Americans in New York. He is the Afrolation author of the collections Demos, An American Multitude, Colonize Me, and Not Your Mama's Melting Pot. These collections have won or been a finalist for more than 24 awards, including the Association for Asian American Studies Award for Outstanding Achievement, the Latino Book Award, and the Library of Virginia Literary Award. Ben is the recipient of fellowships from the Provincetown Fine Arts Work Center, Tickner Center, and Kundiman, among others. His recent work has been published in the Breakbeat Poets, Latinx, Native Voices, Honoring Indigenous Poetry, the Georgia Review, Kenyon Review, Oxford American Poetry, and Tin House. He is currently the Assistant Professor of Poetry and Nonfiction in Old Dominion University's MFA program. So very happy to welcome you here, Ben.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Lucille. That was just an absolutely gorgeous etymology. I'm gonna try and stay in that same kind of a spirit and try and do a little bit of show and tell on Zoom. This is the book that I just came out with in March. And at the beginning, I have a section called Before Anything Acknowledgement. And it's kind of a shout out to one of my ancestors specifically. And I'll show you the picture maybe twice. This is a picture of a wooden prison in Japan. And this is my grandmother, Matsumi Hasebe, inside of that prison. Her father, as you'll hear, was imprisoned there for writing a kind of hybrid essay / poem. Before anything, acknowledgement. Thank you, firstly, to my Obasan, grandmother Matsumi Hasebe, who taught me that if a tyrant's narrative can be a well-formed prison, a poem can be a creature of protesting fire inside of that prison. Thank you for your father, Naka-Hasebe, his fire, his poem that would put him behind the exactness of these very wooden bars. Quote, see the warhorse cry, end quote. He wrote in defiance of an imperialist Axis nation's sun god, Emperor Hirohito. And then the caption here, do we got it? Yeah. The caption here reads, Matsumi Hasebe, January 4th, 1989, Tomei Police Station, behind the same wooden bars that imprisoned her father in embattled World War II Japan. The political prisoners greatly feared a fire, as they would surely burn alive inside their wooden cages. Many of their homes had already burned, including my grandmother's childhood home in the great firebombing of Tokyo, the single most destructive bombing raid in human history. Such great American butchery that bomber pilots had to apply their oxygen masks to keep from vomiting as they were hit by the reek of burning flesh, charcoaled corpses, and clouds of civilian blood. A happy ending to that heavy story is that she married an Onondaga, a Haudenosaunee GI. And so a lot of my work centers around not fitting neatly into one of our intersectional categories. So my mother is Onondaga and Japanese, and my father is Cuban and Appalachian. And so I'm kind of a little of everything, a little of nothing, thinking about where do I fit in? And so the first poem that I'm going to read, it's a poem about poetry. I'm sorry. I try not to do it a lot. But this poem is called, quote, "Write About Being Triracial," end quote, says that guy from Workshop. Write about being triracial, says that guy from Workshop. I was born what I am in ash, under cigarette flick, bellied beneath PA roadside diner bulbs. I was born cooking, leftover ingredients, a little of this, a little of half of a half. I was born scraps, stirred see-through in Pyrex. I was born dribbled from God's measuring. Cracked lip I was, born runny, eggs in a black skillet. Though I was not yellow enough for yolk, not black enough to be burnt, not even brown enough to be sizzle whispered all the way. I was born trying to pass off the problem of not being born a breakfast food at all. My hatred of egg whites the worst, their gluiness stuck in the front of my throat. In the consonants of my captors, you shake your head. You say, race is not extended food metaphor. I say, what if it's true? I was born in the morning on a cold bed of coffee grounds. Crawling on eggshells, I say, you tell me how I was born, what I am. Okay. The first poem in the book is called American Multitude. And the book's called Demos or Demos, which is the root word for democracy. And so I'm thinking a lot about what does democracy look like in 2021? I'm sure a lot of us are thinking really, really similar things. And this poem is called American Multitude, from the languages of my Haudenosaunee Onondaga Nation. As everything begins with the heart, beat of horses, a tribe the thudded color of all creation. My people gather, brindle, as if the night were drizzled long across their backs. She of sickle sword, of tendon and tusk, he who wields the ox goad, fresh jawbone from a filly in heat. They who buck the binary, Tekeni Tsonitsura, two-spirited, a young soul miracles, how many ghosts can fit inside my people, gather, brindle as if the night were not yet gelded. My people gather as if the night were a suckling for the saber-toothed drum, the whistles of pipes, crescentic and long, hatchet my people, gather as if the night were only a splintered thing, bent about the glory of our now dawning home. The second poem is called Nantucket Sleigh Ride, and I hope you're wondering what is a Nantucket sleigh ride? So don't worry. It starts off with a quote. So Nantucket sleigh ride, quote, when you harpoon a whale. Oh, I should say that this quote is from Browning Tyler, grandson of a Nantucket whaler, 81 years old. When you harpoon a whale, it bucks harder than a freight train off rails. It dives down deep as it can go and takes your boat with it, fast. And that's the, quote, sleigh ride, end quote. That last fighting gasp of Leviathan through the sea. You know the whale metaphor. You know all about the beaten horse. Write this off as just another dead animal poem. Or dying, know that my people weren't neatly arced by America, 2 by 2. White boys named Noah harpooned our asses by the tens, by the thousands, collared our necks with barbs and slugged lead into our heads when we bucked. They dove in after our oil and the good fat of our plains, from sea to shining sea. Now here we all are, a tangle of corpses, together we crabs in a clawed bucket list. Cross off every other kind and colony, colonize the crevice between my brown lungs, cremate me in ashy anonymity. Before I surface, I breathe, I war. All right, I got just a couple more for you. This next one is about, I lived in Baltimore for 2 years, and I lived in West Baltimore, where The Wire was filmed, but most appropriately 2 blocks from the Freddie Gray riots in 2016, which you're probably familiar with. Yeah, that's all the background that you'll need. It's called Out My Apartment Window, West Baltimore, August, 2 a.m. I spread the blinds with sleepy fingers, 3 boys and a lookout fourth, none old enough to drive the car they're prowling around. My Marlboro-colored sedan, a Benz, 20-something years old and seated atop bald wheels, soggy under the weight of rain and faded parking lot lights. I think more and more she's the one thing my father left me that I've ever really used. It's a hell of a time they're having, attempt after attempt, to pry the ornament from hood, paint peeled and chipped enough to reveal the gray of stone beneath. 5 minutes of sneakers mounted on her grill and a flurry of whimpering tugs. It's a real sword in the stone scenario. I lay back down in bed and hope within an anvil of heart that one boy will free the silver, and to him it will be Excalibur, and he will brandish the star, the ornament, the sword, long as a boy can. Understand, there is no outstretched arm, no lady hidden in a crystal misted lake. Every old white wizard would see you burned alive. Here, no Merlin will shoulder the spell of all your weight. With your own arm, you cut. With your own arm, you take. Here, we get after our own. From the gray of stones we pry, we pull each jewel of light. Here, we forge our own, bodies laid long upon the anvil of this street. Okay, I've just got one more for you. Did I pass it? I think so. Okay, perfect. This one, another very locating title. It's called Run Home Boy, 2nd Street, Harrisburg, PA, Summertime 17. This is about when I came home. I had this wonderful homecoming planned, and then I was maced by the police. And I'm barely a poet. I'm definitely not a glorious protester, but I had my contacts in, and it was that big police grade mace, and it was absolutely awful. But this is about what happened leading up to that. Again, it's called Run Home, Boy, 2nd Street, Harrisburg, PA, Summertime 17. Bullshit. Watch your sister be arrested for daring to dance, her J stunting across the street. Be next to her, but say nothing, because this ain't Footloose, and you will always be a coward. Instead, just be thankful for iPhones filming, for women with stronger forearms, for men with bigger voices. Think instead about your next drink. Don't be thinking about every other time you were not brave. Don't be thinking, I'm a teacher. Sometimes I even smile at cops. I can win this one over with kind reason. He is bald, white, short. His uniform has come untucked. Be close enough to see cliche, sweat on his upper lip. Be brave, be brave. You think about anything but boot scrape, baton clatter, police grade mace, your own knees crunch against storefront signpost. Stumbling away, I could be blind. What if I am blind forever? You think, why am I mouthing, excuse me, sir? Thanks so much.
Wow, thank you, Ben. That was wonderful. Some very moving and gripping work there. I'd like to introduce our next poet, and that is Cheryl Savageau. Cheryl is the author of Out of the Crazy Woods, a memoir that navigates her experience of living with bipolar manic depressive illness. She's also published 3 collections of poetry: Motherland, An Unhistory of the Northeast, Dirt Road Home, a finalist for the Patterson Poetry Prize, and nominated for a Pulitzer Prize, as well as Home Country. Cheryl has won fellowships in poetry from the National Endowment for the Arts, the Massachusetts Artist Fellowship Program, and she is a 3-time fellow at MacDowell. She has taught at Holy Cross College, Clark University, the University of New Hampshire at Albuquerque, UMass Amherst, University of New Hampshire at Durham, and the MFA program at Goddard College. She currently teaches Indigenous literature and creative writing at the Bread Loaf School of English at Middlebury College. So welcome, Cheryl.
Thank you. I'd like to start with reading a poem that I was looking at places from Massachusetts to read about. Our stories were not historical in the usual sense. They were usually around place. And so I want to read this poem. It's called Red. And this poem, when I was reading it, asserted itself on the page in a shape. And I had always been kind of contemptuous of people, of poems that were shapes on the page, concrete poems. But this one wanted to be a maple tree. And so it is. Red. I should say also that the end of the poem ends with a quote from Christos, to whom this is dedicated. Red. In his new poem, The Red Autumn Woods are a metaphor for leftist martyrs. We are traveling east through a maple forest that blazes the hillsides on both of this winding backcountry road. Look at the trees, I want to tell him. Listen, the trees have their own stories to tell, like the story of fire deep within the heart. They too have been martyrs in the long war against the land, a nation cut down, children denied. 100 years ago, these hills were bare of trees, the stone walls that wind through them, the illusion of ownership. Now the hills are red with maples. My heart is leaping out to meet them. My eyes cannot be full enough. Though acid falls from the clouds, maples have gathered on the hillsides in every direction. See how they celebrate. They are wearing their brightest dresses. Come, sisters, let me dance with you. I offer you a song. Let me paint it red with passion. You are all the women I have ever loved. Next poem I want to read is Graduate School First Semester. So here I am writing about Indians again. And it starts with a quote from Winona LaDuke. The conquest is not sustainable. Thanks for bringing that to our attention, she said the first time, to my response to a history text about a famous painting of the Battle of Quebec that never mentioned the French and only mentioned Indians twice, once as nuisances, once as the noble savage kneeling by the dying English general. This was during the French and Indian War, I said. Soon thousands of French and Indian people would be displaced, sold into indentured servitude, my own family among them. There would be bounties on the heads of Abenaki people in Maine, and the English would sow the fields of the Mohawks with salt. Thanks for bringing that up, she said. The next book mentioned cannibals in the Caribbean, Indians who believed the Spanish were gods, Indians killing themselves, Indian women in love with Spanish pricks, Indians whose names, even when known, were passed over in favor of the ones given them by the Spanish. Stop writing about Indians, she told me. You're making everyone feel guilty. But the next book was back in Maine, home territory, the diary of a midwife, right after that same French and Indian war. And she was using herbs not found in English herbals and wrote that a young squaw visited her over a period of 3 weeks. But the famous historian said only that there may have been Indians in the area, while she wrote at length about white men dressing up as Indians to protest against the rich stealing their lands. Stop writing about Indians, she told me again, only louder as if I was hard of hearing. You have to allow our authors their subject, she said. Stop writing about what isn't in the text, which is just our entire history. This week, she said, I'm really upset. You're telling the same story 3 times because there's only one story about Indians and we all know what it is. So I asked her if there are an infinite number of stories about white people, and she told me to stop being racist. So I stayed away from class for a week because they were reading a book about a mystery in the Everglades, and I knew there had to be Indians in that swamp, and I didn't want to have to write about Indians again. It was on to the next book, written, she said, by a Cherokee writer, which Leslie Silko, who is Laguna, will be interested to find out because the book was ceremony. But that is a small mistake, sort of like saying that Dante is Chinese, so I overlooked it. Now she told me, write about Indians. And I might have done that, except she went on about Indians putting on a mask of whiteness like white people put on blackface. And some of the students wrote it down in their notebooks, and everyone started talking about minstrel shows. Then she wanted me to tell her if there is such a thing as an Indian worldview, and I said, well, yes and no, which I figured was safe, since I would be at least half right, whichever answer she wanted. But when I mentioned the European worldview, she said there isn't any such thing, which was quite a relief to me. I hate to think there were a whole lot of people thinking in hierarchies and as if the earth is a dead object and animals and plants and some people not having spirit. Then she said I'd better stick to what I know, that is Indians, which is what I was trying to do in the first place, and that maybe European philosophy was too much for my primitive brain, in spite of it being my undergraduate major. And I pointed out that the oppressed always know more about the oppressor than vice versa. So she just glared at me and told me that I look Scandinavian, which was a surprise to me. And I wondered why I never was a prom queen, since it was always the Scandinavian girls who got that honor. Maybe they never noticed I was one of them. Exactly how much Indian are you anyway, she asked. I told her I guessed I was pretty much Indian. I suppose she wondered why I wouldn't accept that mask of whiteness she kept talking about as myself. So I'm living in an apartment complex, a senior complex, and this comes from there. It's called the Ban on Bird Feeders. She says a woman complained there are so many birds she's afraid to walk on the sidewalk. Ostriches, perhaps. Not likely. Pigeons? No, we're in the country, surrounded by forest. I imagine a sidewalk filled with blue jays, cardinals, red-winged blackbirds. Maybe the chickadees are flitting from one place to another, the little upside-down birds hanging on a nearby pole with 3 kinds of woodpeckers. Maybe there are goldfinches eating the down of dandelions alongside the red house finches. Maybe there's a dipped in raspberry juice purple finch among them. Now I can hear robins, the sweet voices of Carolina wrens and song sparrows. Mourning doves rise from the grass, their wings whistling. Flickers show off their golden breasts, and above us, the red-tailed hawk circles, ready to dive. Maybe she'll pick off the woman who's afraid of birds, the one who's shrunk to the size of her own fear. Maybe the bluebirds will sing the song of happiness, or maybe they are huddling together on a platform feeder in a winter storm, fighting off contenders. See the starlings in their speckled winter robes. They come from away, but they are here now, painting the sky with dance. Look closely at the little gray birds, the juncos with their pink bills and white breasts, the tufted titmouse with its crest and orange sides. The great blue heron flies toward the swamp, its legs trailing behind. And at the river, an osprey dives for fish in front of my eyes as I stand on a rock mid-river. At dusk, I hear the co-co of the barred owl, the chip chip of a cardinal looking for its last meal of the day. When I get home, they've stolen our bird feeders. This one's called Greenwich Conservation Director. And it's about my sister. This is the place my sister gets to say no to movie stars. You can't drain the wetlands so you can have sheep. Where TV personalities let their poodles out into the jaws of coyotes, and journalists come and interview her, and she becomes a national coyote expert for the day, her image on the screen reassuring the 6-foot joggers afraid they will be eaten by carnivores on the roads of Connecticut. This is the place my sister has found, bigger than the island in Quinsigamon where we grew up, where she knew every cove and waterhole. This is the place where her husband has turned the backyard into a sanctuary, where he counts birds every day, enters numbers into the computer. He is not the only one. Somewhere a student is making sense of all the cardinals and chickadees, the 6 grackles and 4 mourning doves. The hawk, quiet in the old oak, is interested too, though I doubt she counts before she dives. In this place, my sister might be out under the full moon, up to her thighs in the waters of the Sound, to count horseshoe crabs at mating time. Or she is in the kitchen cooking rice with basil and dried cranberries, stew from the just dug oysters. This is the place where her husband records the songs of frogs in the swamp, calls her on his cell phone and says, "Listen to this." Here is the town hall where she talks and fights and cajoles and takes back the land, one estate, one beach at a time. Today, we take our grandchildren to the fishway where glass eels as thin as spaghetti climb the ropes over the dam. Cormorants dive, a pair of swans gaze into the falls, lean into the spray like children into a sprinkler. Out on the island, the herons are building nests, the herring are running, a red-tailed hawk circles. And I want to read a couple of pieces from my new book. This one is called What It Is For. But what is it for, she asked me as we drive through the forest of tiny trees. They are no more than 4 feet tall, these high desert trees. They are not babies. They are full grown, like the scrub pines on Cape Cod. I am lost in this nation of trees, on this road somewhere near Taos, New Mexico. I am used to the maples of the Northeast. I walk in their shade. So this is what they call a forest here. I know that's not really true. I've seen the tall pines that grow up at Los Alamos on the mountain road I drive from Albuquerque to Santa Fe, the road I prefer because they are there. But it pleases me to be amongst this forest of tiny trees. Their difference charms me. Anytime I travel, I'm afraid I'll get there and it will be unfamiliar, alien. But when I step off the plane, I realize, oh yes, this is the earth, and take a trusting breath. She is talking again, and I switch my attention from the land outside the car to her words. But what is it for? She asked again. I don't understand the question. I think maybe I'm not paying close enough attention, distracted as I am by the trees. But it is the trees she is talking about. You know, she says, gesturing with her right hand as she steers with her left. All this, she says, what is it for? What do you mean, what is it for? You know, is it for farming or dairy or ranching? You know, what is it for? What is it for? It's for itself, I say. She shakes her head in frustration. This conversation has become emblematic, those moments of cultural dissonance in so many conversations, when I realize the underpinnings are different, that what I think we are talking about is not it at all. What is it for? The language that inhabits her, that inhibits her, says that these trees, this forest, are objects. What I see as beings, as a nation of trees, she sees as not exactly non-living, because she would admit that trees are alive in a limited way, but they have no sovereignty, no personhood. They exist only in relation to human needs, which means they are expendable. This place should be for something that humans need. Otherwise, what? I could say that they are for making oxygen, that they might hold some medicine that we don't even know about, that they hold together this soil in this arid place and provide food, make a home for a vast population of birds, insects, reptiles, mammals, invertebrates. But that is not what they are for. These are gifts they give freely. Our proper response is gratitude. What is it for? She turns on the radio. I look out the window. The land extends in all its beauty, in all its mystery, this forest, this nation. I've been studying language, and one of the things about it is that in Abenaki, it's a very verb-rich language. And when I started learning, an elder told me that if you were asking for a cup of coffee, you would say, coffee me. And that construction just stayed with me. And this is a poem called Nebi, which means water. It starts with a quote from Poland, who was an Abenaki leader in 1739. This is the river I belong to. Nebi. We breathe the traveling clouds and drink what falls glistening from cliffs and into whirlpool basins carved in granite on its way back to sky. Water me, glisten me, carve and whirlpool me, cascade me, white water me, sing me, babble me, pool me, pond me, swamp me, bog me, trout and salmon me, frog and dragonfly me, loon and otter me. Breathe me the humid sky while leaves gather pools of summer air. Nebi, we say, uligo nebi, the water is good. The Pemigewasset River flows out of its source in Franconia Notch, and I'd like to read a poem about that. The place I'm talking about here is called the Basin, and it's part of the state park system there. On the other side is the Flume, so some of you may have been there. But this is Pemigewasset. We are at the source, the place where the Pemi streams out of the lake over the granite in cascades and whirlpools. Tourists rush past us, two Abenaki women gazing silently into water. I feel like a ghost, she says. They can't even see us. Tourists follow the signs to the next attraction. They don't want to miss anything. Below us, around us, water is flowing. That's because they are in a state park, I say, and we are at the center of the world. The rocks are full of water. Everywhere, water is moving. And I'd like to read one more. This is called Giving Myself to Beauty. They are talking on the radio about Cape Cod National Seashore, and I'm remembering the beaches in September, empty of crowds, the white sand, the gulls, the terns and sandpipers, the cedar maple swamp trail where blueberry bushes grow over your head, the cranberry bog where you have to dodge the poison ivy, the sea turtles by the side of the road, the dunes and the marsh grasses, and the light that Barry Lopez compared to Arctic light, beyond bright. The National Park Service is going to replace the roads that wind through the dunes and grass with straight 4-lane roads. The little roads are part of the charm, part of what makes the Cape special in the first place, one voice argues. I love those little roads in the Cape that wind naturally with the land, that turns and rises, pitch pines and grasses and dunes all around until suddenly you're at the sea. On the radio, another voice says, but 4-lane roads are standard for national parks. After a while, I can't listen anymore. The ugly makers, the destroyers. It is not enough that they cut the forest down to feed the glass factory and created this desert of dunes. Most people think this is natural because the land heals, adapts, transforms itself, and becomes another kind of beauty. Still, these dunes are blowing away. Every year, people plant young pines that hold the sand with their roots, but it is slow going. And now, with Earth's temperature rising, this place will soon be reclaimed by sea. I hear the voices waging paper wars against the land. I decide there is nothing more important than giving myself to beauty. Thank you.
Thank you, Cheryl. Beautiful poetry with such lovely imagery. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Our next poet is Ron Welburn. Ron is of Accomack, Jinjaskin, Cherokee, Assateague, Lenape, and African-American descent, and has Cherokee relatives in Bermuda. His poems have appeared in Brilliant Corners, a journal of jazz and literature, The Common Online, and Stealing Light, a Raven Chronicles anthology, selected work 1991 to 1996. His collection of essays, Roanoke and Wampum, Topics in Native American Heritage and Literatures, was the co-winner of the WordCraft Circle of the Americas Writer of the Year 2002 for creative prose nonfiction. Born and raised in Pennsylvania, Ron has twice won the Edward S. Silvera Poetry Award from his alma mater, Lincoln University. He's also earned degrees from Arizona and NYU. Ron was on the faculty of UMass Amherst for 27 years, where he taught in the English department. He also established the Native American and Indigenous Studies Certificate Program in 1997. He is now retired after almost 40 years of teaching. So I am really excited to welcome you here, Ron.
Thank you. Thank you. Well done. Hello, everyone. I am going to try to get in some reading here, kind of running short. I'm going to read from collection Council Decisions, Revised and Expanded Edition, which came out in 2012. First is a poem that I dedicate to my wife, Sherry. It's called Crows Among the Hawkweed and Black-Eyed Susans. Season, open your mouth this morning and speak colors. Embrace me to the spring smells of your breast. Show me a grandmother's field, dotted with shrub. Speak with me of the hawkweed's hearts creeping toward the rock shelves. Tell me more about the black-eyed Susans with the yellow faces who traipsed through my puberty, multiplying, serene on the slopes of manhood. And season, I will offer you my knowing that band of crows walking among them, foraging grubs and the mouse carcass. Colors spoken for my imagination, adrift acetique waters. Season, I sing for you of these crows among the hawkweed and these Susans who lead me to my sisters, my brothers, and my love. I have, let's see. Okay. This is a poem, somewhat humorous. It's called Sedna Planetoid. If you remember, almost 20 years ago, there was this sort of a discovery of this celestial body that was out beyond Pluto, I believe, and they decided to call it Sedna, which is a name from the Inuit people. Sedna Planetoid, March 2004. So far out here in orbit, 10,500 years is a long story, smaller than a pinhead in the Inuit dark. What pinhead put the creator of sea creatures so far from her people, out beyond the Olympiads on some elliptical path, making Pluto nervous she's so near, giving Neptune a run for his competition? Out again on the margins, Sedna, traveling the universe along the body of a seal, since they have found you so near. Welcome back to Presumption Point. There's a poem, as I've had a chance to read this particular poem with the accompaniment of a guitarist, graduate student in anthropology at UMass. He's also a Cherokee, happens to be from Michigan. It's called Some Old Cherokees. He likes this poem. John Hill's his name. Some of us, that first spring of the new laws which moved our boundaries, broke ground for new planting in hollows in our country, determined not to leave what the Creator gave us to care for him. His land and our abiding was a sacred covenant. Our instructions were clear. Ancestors asleep in our mother's bosom cradled our totality. In his all vision, his power of touch, how did the lands becoming Virginia, Alabama, Kentucky cease to be ours? Pieces of paper, parchment, foolscap, legal for the whims of whom? We are saltwater Cherokees. We are Gulf Coast Cherokees. We are Delmarva Cherokees. We are Ohio Country Cherokees. We are Seneca Old Feud welcoming Cherokees. And we are all at land extensions. Inside new boundaries, our survivors pushed back to ensure our persistence, to prosecute our claim, and witness to lands we held. I sometimes refer to myself as a saltwater Cherokee because my Cherokee ancestors had decided before the 1830 Removal Act to join a group of Cherokee families, and they went across the Chesapeake Bay from the mountain country, and they joined in with the Accomacs and the who were living on the Jingiskin Reservation, and the Acahonics, who are our brother tribes. The Acahonics and the Accomacs are Powhatan people of the Eastern Shore. Okay. Come on. This is a poem called To the Good Old Boys who gloat that they defeated us. Can the land be healed that's been stolen? Thefts sanctified under the icon of the cross? Can the land at this protracted crossroad redeem those pillagers, the good old boys who plow the fields and a few good men in their concrete towers? Gloating about conquest reveals them, gloating their cowboy serenades to genocide, their commandments bowed down before fantasy, pages ripped from the Gideon Bibles in motel rooms of indulgence. Good Christians all, who must answer to their children someday about land theft and murder and pride in making the world safe for America. The dear ticks would fight for us now. See their circle imprints on the limbs, on the bellies of children of the conquerors, and the conquered too, the invitation to dream. The angry winds, funnel clouds that know no fear, the pupil slits like in a jaguar's face looking in the eye of the world. American victories always come sugar-coated, taste of blood for industry and advertising, to hearts numb with the narcotic of progress. And I will, in the interest of, oh, here's one I'm going to read, I'm sorry. It's called A Lover's Question. It's influenced by a rock and roll song from the 50s, early 60s. I think Clyde McPhatter may have sung that song, A Lover's Question. Nights the man recalled the teenager singing a lover's question addressed to the stars, singing of no one in particular, the way Art Blakey introduced a love song from his drum kit to launch into Blue Moon or A Torch, Sincerely Diana. Even a Hank Williams song felt right, or Jimmy Clanton's Just a Dream. She was of copper skin with the longest braid that could have grown on the longest mountain, that was protected on the longest walk, that ended up someplace she'd never tell him to go, there in West Philadelphia, to flavor his longest dream. I'm going to finish with two poems from a new collection that I'm working on, called Carnelian Star. This first one is kind of a jazz poem, and Deborah Miranda really liked this poem, and she decided to publish it in an issue of Shenandoah, which is published down in Virginia at Washington and Lee. The Blue Hour. Now at 21, he is legal as well as hip, this young Southland Indian, in the shadow of the showboat on South Broad Street, hip in his continental jacket and quarter vans, and playing the stingy brimmed fedora so he too can look good like Sinatra. He whispers to the girl on his arm, "Come fly with me," as they entered the nightclub through the hotel. The girl he'd heard about last winter in another office at the job. The girl from West Catholic Girls, whose family goes back to Maryland every spring for turning soil on the old land, and goes back to Maryland every summer to soak up the ancient breezes off the bay, and goes back to Maryland every fall for harvest and to dance in deerskins and calico. Tonight, she wears dark brown pumps, his date, knockout shoes with scalp sides, and a sleek suit ensemble. They had finally met a few weeks ago, and they now enter this musical cavern at the Blue Hour to enjoy the Three Sounds, a jazz trio, with Mr. Tarantine, a choice made together to weave traditions with the urban scene. I'm going to close. This is, among some of the tricksters. Rabbit is a favorite trickster in the Southeast. Inktomi is a foolish man, a foolish one among the Lakota people. And then there's the boogeyman, who's also a Cherokee figure. And I call this Rabbit, Inktomi, and the boogeyman CPAs, meaning Certified Public Accountants. Hey, look how long they've been at it. Old Rabbit bet his pride on his beautiful long tail. Inktomi ignored the wisdom of his own miscalculations, changing his mind twice too often. And wasn't it the booger who introduced currency? That was the genesis of adaptation, a contagion spreading from across the pond to distemper our hand and bone games. Buying on credit and not making a grade, my ancestor owed the company store through a lien on his furniture, his bedclothes, bric-a-brac, and 2 half canoes. He was just one, on his own res. You know others in your house. The firm sent out Coyote as emissary for adaptation. A perfect choice, Coyote, a willing servant of personal misdeed, poor judgment, and foolish giving. Always with an open office and wider eye, he sweetens the perceived life for the desperate. mixes dung with fairy dust to help the enablers, has grown dependent children coming back for more. Not even the good old boys foresee his guile. Coyote's commission is guaranteed by the firm. Even Inktome's truce with him is unassailable. Even Rabbit instructs about the pitch he cannot avoid. The clients of those crayfish scooped into Raccoon's jaws are at the mercy of the gambler, patient in his evil. Coyote, beer and promises in hands, sings to us his favorite Jack Gladstone song, "Show me the money, and I'll bound you to the whoop-up trail." Hold on, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Ron. And thank you to everyone here. I am so grateful to have all of your talent here on display, and thank you, thank you. At this point, if anyone has any comments or questions, we invite your feedback. Please feel free to use the chat or the Q&A feature to express how you're responding to this poetry reading. There were so many different experiences and perspectives expressed today. It was really a wonderful collection of talent. So thank you to everyone. From Jim Goss to everyone, thanks. And especially thanks, Cheryl.
And I see Jim Goss has his hand up. I think maybe he has something to say.
Jerry Spinella also said, thank you so much for your wisdom and sharing. Jim Goss said, thanks, Cheryl. Jim Goss also said, SGI, Ron, how do you pronounce that?
FGI?
SGI, Ron, is what he said. Hawa.
Oh, CO?
He wrote SGI, Ron, and then HAWA.
Oh, Shigon. Is that what he means?
I think so.
I guess so.
Okay. Well, I mean, Shigon is one of the kind of a variation on one of the Iroquois, Northern Iroquois terms for so long, or I'm sorry, for hello. It's
Jim,
still,
it's Shigi.
CO.
Jim just wrote, it's Shigi, Eastern Cherokee.
Oh,
That's
okay,
Shigi.
okay. All right. Thank you, Jim.
Do some of you speak your native language? I'm curious to know, after having researched the revival of Wampanoag, I'm curious to know whether any of you speak Indigenous languages.
I don't speak, but I have been studying Abenaki for a few years now. So I have a little smidgens of language.
Okay. And how is that going? Just acquiring that language? Is it challenging?
Well, some of it's very astounding. I mean, there's a word, well, I read the poem Nebi, but Nebi zone means medicine water, but it also means all those streams of experience that kind of flow through us and make up our own sort of personal power. And I had written a poem in which I was trying to express that concept. So to find it in like one word in our language was kind of amazing. So those kind of things have happened. And I guess also just, kind of realizing that when you have a language in which everything is movement, everything is verbing all the time, it's easier to see the world as alive than as in the English language, everything is like a noun and a verb. And so you have objects. So that's been interesting to me. But also I'm at an age where I'm never going to be fluent, but it's still fun.
That's great.
I've been, thanks to Jim Goss, I learned another phrase there, but I've been using, there's the Eastern dialect, the over the hill dialect, the Western dialects and so forth, and in the Cherokee language. And a while ago, several years ago, I was attempting to write some poems in a kind of, using the Cherokee language, but writing them up in a kind of haiku fashion. And I had to put that project aside. But I've always been fascinated by a lot of different kinds of languages anyway. And one of the things I recall when I was in ninth grade, I found this book that had some Lenape in it. And of course, Philadelphia is Lenape country. And I have some Lenape ancestors. So it was, sometimes you can get these things kind of confused and mixed up, and you try to avoid that. But that's it. You may be able to hear some thunder in the background. That's what we're having, a storm here. So, but no, languages are important, and I mean, it's good to know them. And sometimes those of us who write creatively can add that dimension to our to the kind of work that we do as writers and creative thinkers and imaginative people. What I'd like to try to do is greet people in their languages. That's good if I can learn the language, like with some Choctaw friends and Chickasaw friends, and I say halito, which is greetings to them.
Nice. Ben, do you have any language that you've acquired?
The languages in me are all confused and mixed up, just like all my different heritages. My grandfather was in the sister school to the Carlisle, the famous Carlisle school. So he had the languages beaten out of him, never spoke it, married a Japanese woman, and then said no Japanese in the home. So which is awful. So my mother grew up only hearing Japanese through children's songs. So I know all the Japanese, children's songs, but no Japanese. And so I've kind of seen my mother's own language journey, right? Trying to learn Japanese and connect with that part of her heritage. And then while in Miami, everyone's speaking Spanish all the time, which is really, really, really lovely.
Yeah.
Right. How about you, Lucille?
Yeah, I have not had the opportunity to study Wampanoag, being out here on the other side of the continent in California. But I did have a member of the Mashpee Wampanoag tribe come to one of my readings, and he taught me several words and phrases like kuda pudish, that means I thank you. Wuni kisuk is good day. Wuni nakan is good night. And I would love to learn more, but I will say that languages don't tend to stick in my brain. I've studied French, Spanish, German, and Hebrew. And I do well, I get A's in the courses, or if I'm in a conversation group, I use it. And then as soon as I stop, it disappears, like what I was doing on February 3rd, 1983. It's something that I don't remember, and it all reverts back to English. And I really admire and envy people who are fluent in multiple languages.
Mm.
Well, I highly recommend Duolingo. I lived in Italy for a year, and I brushed up on my Italian by using Duolingo. I don't know if you're familiar with it. It's an app, and it's super helpful if you want to brush up on a language or even acquire a new one.
Duolingo. Thank you.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yep. And any other comments or questions from attendees? We welcome any of your feedback. If not, I think we'll conclude. Thank you all for a wonderful program and for sharing your time and talents with us. Have a wonderful night. Thank you so much.
Everybody.
Thank you.
And come to visit us in Truro.
Yes, I will do that.
Definitely.
The exhibit is looking great. There's some beautiful things and images in the exhibit.
Okay. Thank you, Ulioni, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
thank you, everyone. I loved hearing all of you read.
Yes,
You're a great group. Thank you so much.
thank you.
Have a great night.
Thank you, Lauren.
Bye.